Many people will not be interested in a podcast of this nature because we are not, producing gossips. And we're not talking about, which woman
the trending issues
and all of that. But this is one of it where we talk about these issues and condemn it in its strongest form.
Okay.
That is totally wrong. It is unacceptable. It is against the law to share any form of data about another person to another person without their consent. It's against the data protection law in Nigeria. You can go to jail for that. The laws, the provision is there.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to today's edition of the podcast. My name is John Demide. This is one of our activities marking the 16 Days of Activism. And today I am in the great presence of the country director of Plan International by name Dr. Charles Usie. You may know him by his many achievements and activities he has done. Before he's been the country director of Plan, he had been with Christian Aid and also Action Aid. He had gone through a lot of activities in philanthropy and also civil society activism. He has over 20 decades of experience, and he is here with us to partake in this discourse that we're going to have marking the 16 Days of Activism. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, John. Good to meet you.
Thank you.
Good to have you around.
All right, same here, sir. So as we all know, the 16 Days of Activism is something that has been in the pipelines at least 20 years plus. It started in 1991 at one of the conferences that was set up to actually follow up on the issue of gender. And it has over time gathered its own traction with having activism being marked across the world by different civil society organizations, putting a focus on the issue of gender across different countries. But here in Nigeria, this year's theme is quite, we call it groundbreaking, focusing on digital activism, about the effects of digital stalking on women and children. So what's your take on that so far?
Well, I think in the history of the years we celebrated 16 Days of Activism, I think the theme for this year is quite relevant, it's timely, and actually speaks to the heart of some of the biggest forms of violence, particularly women and girls go through today. And it's interesting because whilst we celebrate in 2025, this year, at this age, at this time, some of the biggest transformational events that happen to our lives as humanity, in terms of the values the changes, the benefits that the digital world has created. At the same time, we are celebrating some of the worst forms of human, what you call, human degradation, as it were, in terms of how we express our humanity. So something which ordinarily is meant for good has actually become one of the biggest destroyers, of a lot of persons, as we know it today. So that's why this year's theme becomes even more relevant to the conversations we have.
Yeah, actually, because if you look at the running conversations that we have right now, the internet upon its insertion into our lives, because there's the discourse that comes about talking about the different age gaps, having those that met internet and those that were born into the internet. There's a discrepancy between knowing what is real and what is not. Even the social element that was hitherto known to all of us, whereby you could go next door to check on someone, now has been replaced by carrying a digital handheld device or something otherwise. But right now, coming into the context of women and girls, officially, there was an instance a while back that had to do with a girl that was stalked, cyber stalked, to the point that she couldn't express herself, and then she now did something like a carousel. Now, to most people on the internet, they looked at it as content, but that was the only way in which she could express herself. She could only express how she was being bullied by writing on placards, and shortly after that, she committed suicide. Now, coming into context within our Nigerian and African perspective itself, how detrimental can we say the internet and digital incursion has been, or is actually playing a role in the social well-being of women and children in their growth?
Okay, so you're asking how detrimental, the social digital space has been to the welfare of women and girls. Let's talk about what it actually means. So for some of us who do not belong to this generation, as it were, we are neither the millennials, we are neither Gen Z. I know we have a term for people who were born in that generation. And that generation was when we didn't have any form of internet at all. And the best you could get was newspapers and TV networks, which showed at certain times.
Yes.
In fact, back in our days, we have to wait till 4 p.m.
4 p.m.
before the TV comes on.
Yes.
At that time, the image of who you are and the profile you carry was actually made possible by how you conduct yourself.
Yes.
And so people will interact with you and get to know you and experience you only when they meet you in person.
Yes.
And to that extent, during our generation, during our time, when we were introducing people those days, if friends meet, group of young people meet, they introduce themselves based on who they actually are. Or, at best, they introduce themselves by their father's names. So when you meet people those days, you either hear, oh, meet John, oh, remember his father is so person. And people go, oh, or meet Charles. If you remember Charles actually is one of the athletes for University of Jos. And they go, oh, so then your identity was formed and made public based on personal interaction, one-to-one interaction, or by family heritage. In this generation, your profile is actually made by what you put on social media. It doesn't matter if it's true or not, but the majority of the people who engage with social media, most times, if you look at their public profile, there's a disconnect between that public profile
And the person.
Now, there's nothing wrong with that because, again, in the past, the only difference was that you had to meet the person to interact with the person. This time, you don't need to meet the person physically. You meet the person digitally. And what that does is that there is a way it disconnects the real person from that image online. And that's why when digital platforms started coming up, when you hear young people tell stories, they tell it in the third person perspective. So they want to talk about maybe an abuse. And what you hear people online will say is, I know a friend who this happened to. In most instances, they're talking about themselves.
In the third person, yes.
In the third person, then they talk about it as if it's someone else. And that changed into the way people now even present themselves online. To such a point that people present a profile online that looks like it's a different person from themselves. But that's the person they project online. Now, whilst this is some way some people choose to protect their real self, other people have also used that same way to create mayhem. And that brings me back to your question. So it is easier these days because you can create a profile online, because you can have a digital profile that is a bit disconnected from the real person. So therefore, it is easy for people to create a profile and use that profile to cause mayhem. So this is how it has affected young women and girls especially. There are many people who in their real selves will not be able to abuse a woman or a child physically. But because they create a pseudo profile online, which is disconnected from the real self of who they are, then they are able to use that profile to cause attack on women and girls. And that is what we are dealing with right now. So you'll find what this both digital penetration has created is more like a non-existing world that exists outside of the real world. And that's a problem because people are no more real with who they are, do not get in touch with the reality of their presence. And as a result, because they do not deal in the current reality, they create a profile and a world that is non-existent. From that world, they are able to perpetrate any crime. And they do that freely because that world has not been recognized. That world has not been, connected with the reality of who we are. So I'll give you a final example of what I mean by these two worlds. In most parts of the world, if you take the UK for instance, as long as you're a British citizen, right, you have a profile created for you by government. Fact. That profile contains everything about you. It's online. Which means at the click of a button, with just your social security number, every single detail about you.
Literally everything about you is within the records.
Every single thing about your life, your education, your religion or not, whatever it is that has to do with you, as long as it has validity in that country, it pops up with the click of a button. That does not exist in Nigeria.
So that would be right to say that they have systems in place
to check. So in the UK or in most parts of the developed world, there is no digital world that is separated from the real world.
From the real world.
Both those two have come together, they've merged, they exist as one.
There's a symbiosis and coexistence, not a separate.
So you cannot commit a crime digitally and escape in real life.
Okay.
So that's what I mean. That disconnect is what makes crime perpetuate in a place like Nigeria. That disconnect does not happen in the developed country. It cannot even exist because of the system the government have built to merge those two worlds into one. In this country, I tell you till today, there are still two different worlds. So that is why attack and digital crime, all forms of abuse online can continue to happen almost as if with some level of impunity.
All right. Thank you so much. So at this point, we'll take a little break while we get a few things ready for the next segment. So stay tuned. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Charles. You've been quite open and expressive on the understanding of the issues that have come into play between the girl child and women online. But we'd like to go deeper. There's the issue of, from a child protection and gender perspective, how detrimental would you say the absence of this structure has become within the context of Nigeria? Because before now, you made mention about the existence of a comprehensive database, for instance, using the case study of the British environment, whereby from your social security information, practically everything is connected. Your personal life, your business life, your social life, everything about you is all in one aspect. So we have the Nigerian Data Protection Rights Act, as we have it right now, that has been passed recently, that has been going through a few modifications back and forth. But would you say that the act in itself is comprehensive enough in its outlook? Would you put it that there's a connect between the act and the rights of the women and girl child that we see being modeled up one way or the other? Because in the course of events, as they go online, as they engage with people, as you rightly said earlier, on the issue of communal existence that had to do with the context of a person's character from interaction, has been eroded due to the digital verse that exists right now. But would you say that the laws as we have it are perfect or on the way there? Or if the alternative that it's not there, how can we try and see the connection or the handshake that you just rightly explained exists in other crimes?
Yeah, I think the Data Protection Act is a step in the right direction. It's just one of those things that need to be in place, to have a fully functioning, thriving, digital verse, as we call it, which so the GDPR is called
Global Data
Protection Rights for Nigeria. It's actually, we studied it a few years ago, and, you know, to use a very decent term, it is almost an exact replica of the European Data Protection Act.
Okay.
Almost an exact replica.
Okay.
There are literally not more than, you know, 10 clauses that are actually different.
Okay.
It's an exact replica, which means, therefore, that it's a good document.
Okay, so we can effectively say we have a good tool that is ready to deal with the issue.
Is exhaustive to deal with the issues of data protection.
I sense a bot coming on.
But the bot there is, that's just one part of the continuum or the ecosystem that actually manages data protection.
Okay.
What that act is supposed to help us do is to moderate and protect how we now exist within the digital verse.
Okay.
So it does not prescribe or contain data of individuals, and it only says how you should process people's information.
Okay.
For instance, one of the act says, a provision in the act there says, for you to use my digital, anything that has to do with my digital profile, I must be aware, I must give consent.
Permission.
It's a simple thing.
Permission, yeah.
So,
that's what
I mean, you must get adequate permission from me.
Yes.
Please tell me in this part of Nigeria where anybody has taken permission from you to use any of your digital profile.
True.
You can't try it in a country where those provisions are active. It's a very simple thing. But now in Nigeria, for instance, you want to do your license, they collect your data. You open a bank account, they collect your data. To get a phone line, you get
your data.
So the question is, how are all of these things moderated in such a way
that doesn't fall into the wrong hands?
That doesn't fall into the wrong hands, and that they are used. Because have you noticed that you get a lot. So for many of us, particularly some, I don't want to mention the names, but just using some particular lines, mobile lines, you get all kinds of unsolicited messages.
Yes.
About some of your personal life. The question is, how did they know?
True.
How did they get this information? So the way data has been used in this country is actually really scary.
Wow.
Because if there are no protective systems in place, I'm talking about even normal life, then you can imagine what women and girls go through. Because then, as usual, where there is a lacuna and where there is a gap, nature abhors a vacuum.
Yeah.
People will take advantage of those gaps and begin to use it for their own gains. And that is why you find that, women and children suffer especially from digital violence than men.
So you can actually see that there's a disconnect between the power, the tripartite concept of power, privacy, and process. Yes. Because there is a process, but the powers that need to be given to ensure that the process is succinct and covers the ground is actually left to be open-ended, so to say. It's allowed to be dictated at random, even though the law exists. Yeah. So within the concept and the construct of the protection of women and children, because as you rightly said, you find out that the scale is tipped in the opposite direction, whereby you have more of the female being bullied and cyber stalked. And even with the concept of deep fakes coming out right now, you can find out that someone could wake up one day and find out that he is giving a discussion elsewhere, and you're like looking and wondering how, when I'm right here with you. So, looking at the concept of privacy, what would you say would be one of the implementing elements we could look at when you're looking at trying to, because I'd like to look at it in small drops make a puddle, and over time it becomes a lake. Now, if we look at our ecosystem coming home right now within Nigeria, we have the law, we have the parastatals, and we have the recipients of the law, which are you and I, Nigerians and all citizens in existence. What would we think would be a decent attempt or a low-hanging fruit that could get people to understand that what they do matters and it affects the next person? How can people get to understand that their everyday activities are actually inimical to not just themselves, but to those around them, and how they can be more personally responsible as opposed to outsourcing it to government, saying that government is the only one that should do it. What's your take on that?
I think it starts with personal accountability. I'll create let me give you some background. Especially when you started using mobile phones, just as far back as 1999, we didn't have mobile phones in Nigeria. So if you see somebody you want to talk to, if I have to talk to you, I have only two options. I have to actually travel and meet you in person, meet you in your house or in your office. Or for those of us who were lucky enough to have landlines, I need to have your number, right?
Yes.
And those days when we have landlines, we used to have what we call the yellow book,
Those
millennials and Gen Z will not understand what we're talking about.
Those big Bible-ish looking books.
Mighty book, which was published every year by the government.
Yes.
It contains every phone number, every landline, in the country, by zones and by location. So I know when Jos code was
073.
073.
Yes.
Enugu 042. That's why we have 042 joints everywhere. That means Enugu code, and all of that. So you now, based on that, trace the number. But you have to buy the book.
Yes.
You have to pay for the book. And when you pay for the book, and it's sold by the post office, you are registered that you collected one of those books. All of those were historic ways of keeping track of who owns, who keeps data, who manages data, and how it is used. Now, a common thing that started happening when we started having mobile phones is I have a number, you have my number, and then I see you passing, and I see you with two beautiful girls, and I say, I like that girl. Can I get her number? We used to think it was just based on relationship levels to say, no, either I have a number, I'll give it to you, or I don't give it to you. That is data protection. You have no right to share that girl's number without her consent. That's where it starts. What did we do? We abused it. We took it for granted. And then you find people even paid. Somebody was making a post the other day and made it like a beautiful post. They talked about the fact that where he lived, from his window, he looked out and saw a bike driver, a delivery guy, delivering something for a compound next door. And a young girl came to take the delivery. And he saw the girl, and according to him, he liked the girl. What did he do? He went downstairs and bribed the delivery guy to get the number of that girl. And the guy gave it to him. And he was very happy about it, that he just gave the guy some amount of money. That is data protection. That is absolutely horrific. That people begin to think that is normal. And every time we talk about those things and we allow it to go, we normalize it. And over time, it's going to be the biggest drama and the biggest disaster that we're going to deal with. That is unacceptable. At every point in time, those kind of conversations happen. We should condemn it by every form. If friends sit together and you have that conversation where you are sharing details of other people without their consent, that should be, discouraged. So my direct answer to you is it begins with personal accountability. And it comes with socializations like this, like this podcast. I wonder how many people will watch it, because many people will not be interested in a podcast of this nature because we are not, producing gossips. And we're not talking about, which woman
the trending issues and all
that. And all of that. But this is one of it where we talk about these issues and condemn it in its strongest form. That is totally wrong. It is unacceptable. It is against the law to share any form of data about another person to another person without their consent. It's against the data protection law in Nigeria. You can go to jail for that. The laws, the provision is there. That's one. So people need to be socialized. People need to be aware that this is wrong, that this is a crime, and this cannot happen. That's the first thing. Personal accountability. Then the next thing is, because you talk about low-hanging fruit. This is a low-hanging fruit. So we socialize both, with friends, with our children. Most of our children and young people have all kinds of devices that get them connected to the internet. We should let young people know that whatever profile you create online is as good as your real life profile. So therefore, be very careful and be very intentional with what you put out there. Some people say, no, it's my page. It's my page. But what you put on your page, will you demonstrate it in real life? That's the question. So let me give you very typical examples. Some girls will go out and say, I've seen those kind of videos online because we track it as well. Because we work for plan is about the girl child. We're set up 89 years ago to seek for the rights of children and equality for girls. And everything we do is to seek how girls actually protect themselves. So this example, final example, in terms of low-hanging fruit, is another form of socialization, but this comes with a call to action, which means be very intentional with what you put on the internet. Don't just be comfortable with saying, it is my space. It is your space. But what you're doing is that when you put it out there, you lose control of that space. Just the way, if you invite anybody into your home, you can't predict what will happen.
True.
So a young girl who goes online, wears skimpy dresses, dances for the camera, puts it on her page and says, it is my page. In essence, what you have just done is, it's as if you've gone to a public market square and you wear that same clothes and you're dancing. So for those kind of people, I ask them, would you do that in the taco market? Would you go to taco market, wear those same things and start dancing and say, well, it's my life? You wouldn't do that, right?
No.
So why would you do it online? So it's the same thing. Have the same consciousness that what you put online it's as good as you doing it physically. That's a low-hanging fruit. And this socialization should happen from schools. This is what, CBOs, community-based organizations, NGOs, all of us should be doing in schools. We should be creating awareness, using every opportunity to let people know that your digital profile is as good as your real life profile. They are not two separate things. So be very intentional with what you put out there, with how you share information, and how you allow people to have access to you.
Okay.
That is a low-hanging fruit.
All right. Thank you so much. That's quite in-depth. And what you said now just sparked up a memory of a little discourse we had a while back. There was an issue where we were trying to understand what are the motivators that lead to abuse occurring. And in one of those discussions, it was kind of posited that there is the nature, nurture, and the hormonal issues that come up. Now, no doubt it's been an excuse that has been given to, would I say, cover the atrocities that have happened over time. However, the question that bogs the mind is this. You've made mention about being intentional and being accountable. Is it open season that says that, yes, there is the pride in person that leads to a person trying to express him or herself in whatever way, fashion, or form? And as you rightly said, right now, we've had instances where you have different forms of content that show some explicit personalities. But in a situation whereby it is expected, it's a give and take, so to say. So I'd like to just sum it up in saying that, so if we are going to try and bring a more responsive community or society, it has to be a case of give and take. And sometimes you have to give what is not what you ordinarily wouldn't want to give out. For instance, some level of your individuality in order to get security. Because there's the position, as I said earlier, on the issue of hormonal issues, whereby a skimpy dress-clad lady puts up her content online. The male now sees it and is pushed in different ways, and he now unfortunately commits a crime. Now, at that point, when it shifts from emotion and intent to action, it is seen that there was some self-control that was let loose, that now led to the infraction and the eventual causation of the problem that is on ground. Is it justified to say that what you put out draws in what you get? It may be blunt, it may be painful, but it's an issue of cause and effect. Would you agree with that?
So not entirely, because then it makes good excuse for perpetrators of violence and all kinds of sick people out there crawling the internet looking for opportunities to unleash their evil deeds. So I don't think so. There is no amount of provocation a lady will give online that should provoke a man to commit a crime. I don't agree with that. I think the person is sick. If anybody commits a crime because he sees a girl dancing naked online, he's sick, he needs help, and should be treated accordingly by the law.
True.
So there's no amount of provocation, because then that's the same excuse some people give. Oh, she dressed provocatively, that's why she was raped. there is no
There's no
cause and
nexus.
effect. There's no cause and effect there. You are a rapist. Full stop.
Okay.
It's just like somebody saying, because I manage money, so I stole. No, you are a thief. And you had the opportunity to steal because you had money. Yes. If you're not a thief,
Then
there
you
is
will
no
not
amount
be-
of money that will keep in front of you that will make you steal.
True.
If you're not a rapist, no matter how much a girl dances naked in front of you, you will not rape.
That's true.
So it just brings out the inner,
Intent that has been born.
has been latent, and you just had an opportunity.
Okay.
That is not to take away the fact that, as a woman or as a girl or as a child, it is for your own personal protection. That's why, for instance, you own your house, you live in your house. Nobody has access to your house. And anybody who does that will be picked up by the police because it's a crime. But you still lock your door.
True.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. You still lock your door.
Yeah.
But even if you know that nobody's allowed into your house, so it's the same thing online.
Yeah.
It protects yourself. Because it's still your space. Yes. It's still your life. Yes. But protect it. Just the way you lock your door. It's the same way. You don't open your door and tell people it's my house. You keep your door open and say, but it's my house. Yes, if you keep it open, indirectly, some people who
will take advantage of
will
that.
want to steal, will take advantage. It's the same thing online.
Okay.
So for me, it's not a cause and effect thing to say it's because either someone does this online, that's why they get this. No.
Okay.
Because we found out where people take advantage. Some of them, there's an NGO I met with and we're trying to support in Nigeria. And one of the things they do in Nigeria, and particularly in Abuja, although across Nigeria because they're based here in Abuja, is to support young girls who are actually being harassed online or being blackmailed online.
Okay.
What we found out, which is shocking, is that majority of the young ladies and even young women who are maybe newly married or whatever, who are being harassed and blackmailed online, are not being blackmailed or harassed by strangers.
Like somebody that knows them.
Who they already know. In fact, most of them are people who they have either just been in a relationship with or are currently in a relationship with. I met one of them was a young girl, for instance, who was dating this young boy. Both of them very young. In fact, age mates. They met in school, started dating. They graduated from school, went to serve, and they started working. The girl had a better job than the guy. And what happened? The guy actually, for whatever reason, started blackmailing the girl that he needs some money. Initially, she said, I don't have enough to give you. I'm just starting to work. I'm still even living with my parents. I'm trying to save up so that I can get a place, build a life for myself. And the guy was insistent he needs this X amount of money. She couldn't give. And he started threatening her. I'll put all our new videos online. And out of that panic, she started giving this guy literally all her salary. For the first 1 year she worked, not even her parents saw a kobo from what she earned.
Wow.
Because of this guy. Until she could take it no more. Her parents were getting worried. She said, come, you're working. We can't even see you, being able to pay for milk that we drink in this house. What's happening? You can't even take care of your own self. You still come to us. What is happening? And it was at that point she knew that she couldn't keep it any longer. And she ran to this NGO for help. Of course, the guy was tracked and arrested, and that was done. But the question I have, which is for me, it's a parting conversation for everybody listening to this podcast is, when a young boy and a young girl are both involved in, let's say, a sexual act, which is usually most of the case, and there is a potent threat for that video to go online, why is it more shameful for the woman than the man? So that's the point I don't understand. Why has society accepted that it is more shameful to see a naked girl than to see a naked man? Because majority of the people who've dealt with, and I speak from experience, who have every form of violence, most of them are women.
True.
So why do we think that women have more to lose than men? Because the more we have that kind of mindset and understanding, it fuels the abuse online. It is as shameful for a woman to be seen online naked as it is
to see a man. So with
there is no better one there.
Sorry, Doc. I think at this point I need to put a plug there so that I could hold on, because that particular point you asked is a very good cliffhanger, and I think we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes while we're rounding up to hear a lot from Dr. Charles. There's still more on the way. Thank you. And we're back. And so far, we've been having an interaction with Dr. Charles Usie, the country director of Plan International, and he has been giving us great insight to the way in which the internet has, in fact, been molding and affecting our lives, and the need for personal accountability to ensure that we can actually put our own little might to ensure that better things are done, using the internet as a tool and not as a tool of cohesion and advancement, and not a tool of oppression and down pulling of people. So, Dr. Charles, before we went off just now, you actually we ended on a cliffhanger talking about how much of an impact it is. Why is it that it is more detrimental to have a female person exposed as opposed to the male person? Now, that will be something that we would actually come back to, but I think the major problem that we have on our minds right now is that perception the community has, looking at it, naming and shaming the nakedness of a female as opposed to ignoring that of the male. And if I get you very well from that, that's like you are alluding to the fact that we need to have a re-engineered moral understanding of what forms obscene and what forms a taboo. What has become a placebo to us to assume that it is easy for it is the man, is okay. But once it's a woman, it is vilified, pushed down, and made to look like she is less than being subhuman. So with this in mind, I think what begs to answer is, how can we as a community, first, as a country, in a larger scale, and as a continent, try to ensure that the sanctity of womanhood and the girl child is not put up for grabs or for ransom?
I think that's why we celebrate a day like this, because historically we found out that abuse in every form, it's usually in terms of numbers and frequency targeted more at girls, women, and children.
Okay.
That's why we have a day like this. That's why we have this kind of activism for 16 days. And for us as a community, we must know that it is our duty to protect every single person, be you male or female. And we do that by reevaluating what our moral standards are as a people and as a community. Because I think that's where it's tilting towards the fact that women now suffer disproportionately, in compared to men and boys. It's because society has condoned it or we've allowed it. Okay. It becomes good content, when a woman is being dragged out of the plane and her private parts are being exposed. If it were a man, would it have made content? Mm-hmm. Imagine a guy who had an altercation with air hostesses and he's been dragged out of the plane. In fact, the fight that two popular men had recently, I think it's some guy or some of these guys.
And the one on the plane, yes, where they were, yes.
Who fought on the plane. Yeah. He didn't gain as much attention and yes, popularity like the young girl who was being dragged out of the plane the other time. Why? It's because, a female body part was exposed on that one. The video made rounds everywhere. People have used it for stickers, every form. However, two men also fought shamefully, disgracefully. It didn't make the kind of headlines it should make.
Yeah. So it comes
Society
back
has condoned it.
Yeah. So it just comes back
that
to
one thing is more acceptable and normalized than another. So that's why I said it comes back to we as a people reevaluating what our values and what our appetite is, for what is wrongdoing. And within these 16 days of activism, is to recognize first that women, girls, and children are more, affected by every form of digital, violations, attack, abuse than men. It's a fact we must accept first. Yeah. Because it's only when we accept it that we now ask, what do we do about it? Now, when we accept this, the question is, who are the perpetrators? Most of them are men. Again, that is why I'm happy to have this kind of a podcast. That as a man, first, my role is to condemn it as a man and ensure that I am not one of those people who are perpetrating this cycle of violence. And then to call on other men to also do the same. Because if you reduce the number of men who will subscribe to this kind of life, then it means we are reducing by sheer statistics the number of possible perpetrators. And then secondly, is to begin to build or create opportunities for more digital safeguards. And one of it is to ensure that we, as much as possible, condemn it when we see it. When we have public condemnation for any form of violence, meted out against women, girls, and children, then we begin to build solidarity with that gender that suffered disproportionately, for every form of online violence and digital violence. And for me, thirdly, is to create awareness.
Which is what we are doing right now.
What we're doing right now to make, especially women and girls know that because you are there are more tendencies for people to attack, abuse you, violate your rights. Then be very careful and be very intentional in how you use digital space, with who you connect with what you put out there. But it shouldn't limit you from being who you are,
from being
from enjoying that freedom that comes with engaging with the online community, because that is a community you should belong to. I will feel really sad if women, simply because they are afraid of violence and abuse, will not express themselves online and get involved in the digital world. For me, they'll be left behind, and that is what I don't want to see in my lifetime.
Thank you so much, Dr. Charles. You've given us quite a very insightful talk and just a window glimpse into your sites and activities and activism on the issues of the girl child and women. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for giving us your time and your space and bringing us into your systems and your phones. This is one of our activities for the 16 Days of Activism with Dr. Charles Usie. My name is John David from Lawhub, and we implore you, please, please, and please be intentional. Because once you take control, you can ensure what goes out and always protect yourself online.